You must take your opponent into a deep dark forest where 2 plus 2 equals 5, and the path leading out is only wide enough for 1. That is probably the most famous Mikael Tal quote, and when I saw this game I instantly thought of it because Magnus Carlsen takes Jorden van Foreest into the deep dark. You see what I did there? So Magnus with white, he kicks off here with e4. We get e5, no opening rubbish from Magnus. This is the European Team Chess Championship. Norway versus the Netherlands. Magnus's opponent here, a super grandmaster. You know, anyone over 2700, I'm basically considering super GM. We get bishop b5, the Roy Lopez or Spanish game. And now knight f6, the Berlin defense. Vladimir Kramnik frustrated the heck out of Garry Kasparov. Sorry, wrong picture there. That's young Kramnik. Short back and sides Kramnik frustrated the heck out of Kasparov in 2000. World Chess Championship. GMs have been banging their head against the brick wall ever since. So d3 often played, but we get castles here. Now the pawn is captured, and if you go pawn d4 here, these are the lines where the queens come off the board, but we get rook e1, the knight drops back, and now you can immediately take this pawn with the knight, you know, set up discovered checks and stuff. But Magnus goes a4, of course, what else? He loves pushing that rook pawn, right? Now this is known theory, you can't capture the bishop or pawn recaptures, you dislodge the knight and it's not great for black. So bishop e7 played, closing the e-file, we get knight c3 and now pawn a6 chases back that bishop, and this is a great move by black. This pawn is about to drop. Never play f6, rubbish move in this position. d4 comes, blowing things open for the sake of a pawn, the king's getting attacked. So e4 was played, and now you give back the pawn, which was gonna drop, but you do it in such a way that now this knight recaptures, and so you can clear this d pawn. It charges down the board all the way into Magnus's territory, and this is a great move. Magnus knows his stuff. You don't go d3, kill this bishop for the rest of the game. You go bishop d3. Now watch this. Bishop e6, bishop e4, bishop d5. We got some weird kind of yin and yang thing going on there. The bishop's staring down and they're preparing to exchange. But it doesn't happen immediately. d3 played, castles, bishop f4 onto that nice diagonal, and now bishop b4. We get a little bit of tickle going on. Not literally, you're not actually allowed to reach out over the board into your opponent's space, in case you didn't know that one. But after rook e2, we get rook c8, bishop d2 offering an exchange, and now the bishop drops back. This is what I mean. We don't see the exchange of those bishops. Black saying, actually, this one's better than yours. It's an important defensive piece for me. So we get queen e1 played. Now this bishop taken. The rook recaptures and f5. Driving back the rook, yes, but the king's lifted the kimono. This can get drafty now. You have to be aware when you play such a move. So bishop f6 now played. We get pawn b4. Beautiful expansion of those pawns on the queen side, and now queen d5. And look at that spider in the center of the board. A black widow, 8 legs out in every direction, nothing like a centralized queen. And now Magnus, what does he do? Well, obviously he pushes the rook's pawn. He loves plowing down the board with these ones, takes control of g5 some more, and now black goes h6 so as to not let a minor piece land on that square. We get bishop f4, one of the points of Magnus's pawn here, you know, stopping any g5 stuff. Now we get king h7, queen d2, and now this is an interesting moment because Jorden plays a move which gives up a pawn. So we have to ask ourselves, what if he played the immediate bishop e7 going after this pawn? Well, now Magnus has got rook b1 defending, and queen a2 doesn't work because if you attack this rook and this pawn, well, now you can play queen e1. Defend the rook and still cover the pawn. Classic right triangle, as Hikari would say. And if this one's captured, now you drop this bishop because that battery was lined up, and here white is doing great. So coming back here, why is this relevant? Well, Jorden plays the rook to the e-file here. We get an exchange, rook recaptures, the pawn drops, but now he goes bishop e7. What's the difference? Well, now if you go rook b1, there's queen a2 as before, but queen e1 to stay with the protection of the rook and the pawn is not working due to bishop d6 or bishop d8, and you're picking up a piece. Now, although white can take the rook, it's not defended. You know, the line goes on. Black takes with check. This is key. The queen driven back, or you can block with the knight, but when the smoke clears, black is a minor piece up. Okay, some long lines, but that's why Jorden went for this. So Magnus can't cover the pawn with the rook, so he goes b5, Jorden captures, wins back his pawn, but there's a problem, really highlighted after queen f4, bishop f6, pawn h5 and king g8. Magnus here has the better endgame, despite the computer saying it's only about half a pawn better, because black has got 1, 2 and then 3 pawn islands, although because this pawn clamps on g6, you can almost consider this 4 pawn islands with the way the f pawn is isolated. Plus this knight has some great outposts. So we get queen d6 invading. Just a great probing move from Magnus. You know, if the queen now invades here, well, it's actually better for Magnus with rook e1, rook's coming off, but then these checks start around the black king. So instead, black maintains the setup of the pieces and pushes on with this pawn which was weak anyway. He wants to ditch this weakness to pick up Magnus's weakness. We get queen d7, hitting the unprotected rook. This queen slides, picks up a pawn, protects the rook. Magnus now picks up this one, and after queen f7, you can go queen g4, but what does Magnus do? Well, obviously he chops off the queens. Also a good move. Magnus loves an endgame as much as Giri loves a draw, right? Probably got to stop bashing Giri so much. We now get rook b1, targeting the pawn, rook e7, king f1, g5, drives back this bishop, but Magnus puts it here. He wants pawn g4 soon, as we'll see, after rook d7, kind of shuffly waiting move, covering this pawn. Does black want to maneuver a piece to this square? Well, it's tough to go for active plans. We get king g6, rook b5, great activation of that cannon, looking in both directions here. And now this pawn was pushed, captures, king takes, the king comes back to g2, king g6, and this knight now hops round. Looking here at c4, e4, amazing outposts, and it's really tough here for black to find active plans. You know, the e5 square under white's control, this pawn needs babysitting. It's a lot harder for black to go after this one because this one's dropping. So knight a7 was played, miserable move, but it kicks back this rook. Now the knight comes back to c6, we get knight c4, hitting the amazing outpost, covering key squares. g4 now played, slightly weakening this pawn, but on a good day you've gained some space, you've opened up the bishop scope, but now rook b5 back, again cutting the king. Magnus biding his time. Can he convert this one? We get rook e7 now played. Bishop d6 hits that rook. It slides once more. Jorden shuffling. And now this is great from Magnus because you want to go king g3, come after this pawn, but then there's bishop h4 check. And if you capture, well, this one drops. And, you know, the game is a lot more balanced. But what we see Magnus do is knight d2, re-maneuvering that steed. Now knight a7, again tickling the rook. It drops back to b1. King f5, knight e4, and now here Jorden, he just blinks. He's in the deep dark forest. He looks for 2+2, he comes up making 5, and he goes bishop e5. Not a good move. You know, not obvious why it's not a good move, but it's not. The computer, by the way, wanted bishop d8, then going b6, setting up that kind of defense. You know, the Silicon Overseer sees all, right? But it was still tough for black to hold even there. But now capture's played, king recaptures, king g3, preparing to win the pawn, and what do? If you come with king f5 here to hold it like that, well, now there's this check. And this pawn's dropping, not good. So the rook covers. Now we get rook b6, cutting the king. It's starting to run short of squares. And we see rook c7 played. But if you go knight c6, the most natural move, well, now there's check. King e6 only square and knight c5 check. Again, you're winning the b pawn. So rook c7 was played, but no good. Magnus simply takes the pawn, and if you capture here, well bang, you're literally walking into mate in 2. I believe this is called the Arabian checkmate, thanks to a couple of people that commented this one for me. But coming back here, that one wasn't captured. We see rook f7, and now this is classy. Magnus goes f3, not f4 check, or this rook takes with check. Now we get rook f4 check, the king steps back, the rook steps back, now Magnus goes f4 check, and we get resignation. Because this time if black captures, you're not taking with check, and therefore white can capture on b7, hitting the knight. Obviously you want to save your knight, right? You know, knight c6 for example, but then there's the check. The rook forced back, this one drops, you know, it's absolutely hopeless. Even if you save your rook, well then your knight drops over here, that's a lost endgame. The endgame go, working his magic once again. I hope you enjoyed this one. Smash subscribe to never miss another, and see another epic game of chess. Check out the video on screen. Hope to see you soon.